I wanted to move us into the next activity so that we can continue to deepen the conversations that we've been having at the table. But first, I wanted to offer up my own heartfelt koyanakpak to Nami, Teresa, and Prairie Rose for spending the morning with us and sharing from their heart, really, really putting words to the experiences that I think a lot of us in the room have been having. And it was lunchtime, and I feel like they gave me a lot to chew on, pun intended. I feel like they really did, though, give me a lot to chew on, and I can't wait to go back. I'm really thankful this is being recorded because I can't wait to go back and listen to some pieces again and really, really chew on things. And I've been thinking about the purpose of our summit and for me, a big question we've been asking and that we just spent discussing at length is this question of how do we show up for each other? How do we actually be partners for the next 10,000 years? What does that look like? And someone answered it so well, or started off the discussion in a really good way when they said, before we can be good relatives to each other, we have to be good relatives to ourselves. We talked a lot about this morning, about the different hurt that we carry and how just because of history and what has happened, there's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of healing that needs to take place on both the individual and community level at the same time, and they're one and the same. And so this next activity that we're going to ask you to do is meant to help us start thinking about that piece of how do we be good relatives to ourselves, and I think part of that is starting to reflect deeply on the way that our identities intersect with each other and the many pieces of our own self, the many pieces that make up our own identity. So I guess I will preface this by saying that this is not a perfect activity. You may notice some flaws. There are other categories we could have put up there, but as you'll see if you turn around, there's already 9 pages and we were running out of space. So please bear with us. But what I'm going to invite you to do now is stand up. And this activity is called Aspects of Identity. And it's a silent activity. And I think after lunchtime it will be good to have us moving around a little bit. But it's a silent activity, and you'll be mostly moving around in the back, right there. So if you turn around, you'll see 9 pages all along the wall. And they have different categories on them, from socioeconomic class, education level, race and ethnicity, immigration status, gender, sex, sexual orientation, ability, age, spirituality/religion, and belief system. So what I'm going to do is be reading a series of prompts. And all that I ask you to do is, as I read it, that you go to the page, to the category, if you will, that most speaks to you when I read that prompt. I understand that, again, it's an imperfect activity, and we are complex people, and we don't just have a religion part of ourselves and an age part of ourselves. But if you'll bear with me for just this activity. Maybe if you're in the front, maybe if you want to start moving closer to the back where the pages are. And if there are any elders or other folks in the room who would rather sit this activity out, that's okay. Also, I would say that part of our agreements is taking care of each other. And so if you notice someone who needs assistance or would like assistance, this is an an opportunity for us to take care of each other in this space. Okay, so this first prompt is, I think about this aspect of my identity the most. And there's no one perfect answer, and it's okay if in the back of your mind you know that there are other aspects that you could also go to. We don't have to have a perfect answer. I think about this aspect of my identity the most. Okay. And so I'm just going to move us right along. I think about this aspect of my identity the least. I know the most about this aspect of my identity. And if you end up staying in the same spot for a couple of my prompts, that's okay too. I know the least about this aspect of my identity. I know the least about... Oh. This aspect has the most impact on how people treat me. This aspect has the most impact on how people treat me. This aspect has the least impact on how people treat me. This was most emphasized by my family. This aspect was most emphasized by my family. This was least emphasized by my family. I think about this aspect of other people's identities the most. I'll read that again. I think about this aspect of other people's identities the most. Oh, we got it. I think about this aspect of other people's identities the least. This aspect has taught me the hardest lesson.
Thank you.
Okay, Kuya Nakpak. So I can already tell that people are starting to reflect, and it's bringing up some thoughts, and that's exactly what we were hoping for this activity, and I've been through it myself, and I know the thoughts that start to bubble up. What I would invite you to do is, if you would sit at your small table. We'll give you a few minutes to reflect with each other about how that activity was, and I'd invite you to talk amongst yourselves about what came up for you and what did you notice about yourself and the group. So take a few minutes to reflect on your table, and then we'll invite some folks to do popcorn style share out with the group. Okay, here I am again, interrupting your conversations. If I could interrupt you and invite you to think about the next two questions on this slide here. How is this important to what we're doing here today, this exercise? And or how do your identities and your experiences connect with the work you do? So we had some time to reflect and think about what came up, and now we're going to think about how is this important to the work that we're doing, and how does this connect, how do our identities and our experiences connect with the way we do our work? Sound good? Okay. Okay. Would anyone like to share out something that came up in their group, in their small groups? Would anyone like to take the mic to share anything, any reflections? Any brief reflections?
I like what a lot of the facilitators saying about bringing into the space, and just that tribal nationhood, I think, is a very, especially with so many Native folks, just it's a different thing than race or ethnicity. It's belonging to a nation that's a political entity that at its root is the stewards of the land. And I think that has so much to do with many of the issues that we face, being denied, and the knowledge and intimacy with that land, and as a political entity that stewards the land. So that just came up for me that, I had to go to race and ethnicity many times, but I think more to the core would be tribal nationhood.
Koyana, for that reflection, and definitely a way that we can make the activity stronger in the future.
I was asked to share this response. All those categories, I didn't realize at first there was some more off to the side. Then I started thinking, well, what if this was in Inupiaq? What if it was in my own? It would be completely different, because these are very westernized thoughts, categories. They're very, English loves to categorize and give labels. And it would look completely different in our own native languages. Tavra.
Koyanakpak yayak. Oh, sorry. You next.
I just wanted to say what I felt was every time I went to a different station, I started to look for allies. I started to look for my squad. I wasn't dwelling on my past. I was looking to my future of who my allies are, who are there going to be there to support me, who has my back, who's going to lay out the path in front of me. That's what I was looking at as I was looking at the different groups. Gunarchish.
Gunarchish. I'm a coming. Did you want that? Okay.
Thank you. What I shared with my group was just that activities like this always make me feel really humbled and maybe a little embarrassed, because it brings to my attention how many of these categories I've never had to think about growing up, and that I was just exempt from having to acknowledge or process any of that as a young girl growing up in Nebraska.
Thank you for sharing. Maybe one more after this?
Okay. If I'm too loud, someone say something. I don't normally use a microphone. Something that was brought up in our group is how little people stood by immigration status when we were talking about, things that we think about when we identify ourselves or other people. Immigration status is definitely something that's a big topic in the nation right now, but it's not necessarily as big in Alaska. And so I think it brought to our attention that there's a lot of things that we all feel here and that we're experiencing, but there's so many other things that our brothers and sisters are going through that sometimes being isolated in Alaska, we don't always see and hear. These immigration issues are much bigger in states where they share a border, with Mexico or things like that. And the ladies up here talked about it earlier, and I think that that's something that some of us came in not thinking that we were going to think about, and then it's ended up being kind of a bigger topic today than we expected, and I thought that was interesting.
Kuya Nakpag for sharing.
You have to forgive me. I'm stepping out of my comfort zone right now at this moment. I had a very profound revelation today. I'm starting to realize how much time I spent all by myself. Some of you know the kind of work that I do. I spend a lot of time out in nature, and I restore cemeteries. I visit sacred places. I bring human remains back from museums. I do some kind of really special work. And I had a profound experience in the last half hour. I realized the elders that I used to go to are gone for wisdom and advice. They're gone. And I spent so many years of my life alone. That I got used to it. Living separate from you. I got used to it. And I used to be a really good speaker, storyteller. I used to be really upfront on stage. But I stepped away from you and spent all my time with ancestors, making sure they come home. So my profound feeling the last half hour is I need to come back to you. I spent too much time in the cemetery, too much time bringing bodies home. So I want to share my experience with you. Our ancestors are coming home. There must be a reason for it. And I now believe the reason they are coming home is because you are the best of our people. And they chose you to come home to. So I guess what I'm trying to share with you is I need you in my life. And I'm very grateful right at this moment to be among the best of our people right here. And so I'm struggling with my voice at this moment, but I just want to say thank you to First Alaskans for allowing me to find my voice at this moment. Thank you. Kanashti.
Koyanakpak. I just wanted to take a moment before we switch into the rest of our program to honor what you said, to honor what you shared, the love that you've been putting into your entire lifetime for our people. We can really feel it. And we would not be here right now were it not for that love that you have. And it's because of that love that we're here. So, Koyanakpak, from the bottom of my heart, I know that we all feel it right now. And we're so, so glad that you're here with us. Okay. So I'm going to pass the mic to my sister, Agaslak. She's going to be leading you into the next part of this.
So continuing to build on this activity, we know it's not perfect, but part of this summit is about bringing visibility. Right? We heard a little bit about what it's like to feel invisible, to be in the margins, to feel like you're isolated or alone. And so this activity is meant to help bring visibility to the many layers of who we are as a people. In my mind, this text would have been a lot easier to read, but we're going to pass out sheets at each of your tables. And what we are hoping to achieve is a representation that we co-create, that illustrates the spectrum of social justice issues in Alaska. I don't know what all of those points are. I don't know what all of your movements are. I don't know what everyone's working on. But I do know why I'm involved. I do know why I show up. For me, it's about ending the criminalization of our ways of life. That's what I think about every day. And so on your sheets, and this was just addressed by, I think, our first respondent when he talked about the difference between our racial and our political status. We're seeing eye to eye, because that's in here too. So down on the bottom of my spectrum, in my view, criminalization of our ways of life on our traditional homelands. That's kind of like base where we're at. Not everybody might agree with that, but that's my experience. That's my view. I remember growing up and spending time with my grandparents in Quinhagak, and my grandparents' house was a little bit outside of the rest of the village. And I remember the feeling of my grandpa. There was a moose nearby. And I remember that hurried feeling, like we were doing something wrong. Hurry. It's not in season. I didn't know all this at the time. But there was a sense we gotta hurry. We can't tell anyone. We gotta cover this up with a tarp. It was like a secret. And I remember as a kid, I think I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I didn't understand at the time, but I was like, we're not like this. Why are we being like this? You know, the questions that come up. And now that I'm older and I'm doing this work, I realize he was carrying that pressure. He was carrying that legal system that was on top of him, that was instilling fear in him for simply doing what we've always done. And it's fueled me, that feeling. It's fueled me. And that's why I do social justice work. So for me, that's there at the bottom. Midway through, Alaska Native peoples and our ways of life are no longer seen as a special interest group or a stakeholder group. And our racial and political status are both understood by all Alaskans. Because you're absolutely right. Before there were race labels, we were a people. We were tribes. We had governance systems. We had ways of reciprocating and taking care of each other. And that's why we have government-to-government relationships today, right? Inherent sovereignty. But sometimes people confuse that with our race. And they get mad about special privileges. Oh, natives, you get all this free stuff just for being native. Because they think all we carry is a race hat. They don't understand the political status that we have. And so a lot of times people get angry, or they're like, why do you get free medical care, right? A lot of you have probably seen some of these publications that try to help educate Alaskans. It's like we prepaid in advance, right? By giving up much of our traditional homelands, giving up who we are, all these kinds of things you heard shared this morning. We prepaid in advance. And that contract and compact with the federal government it's a government-to-government relationship. And for me, I think all Alaskans should know that. We're not too far, you know, a few things in between. And then at the top of my spectrum, self-determination over our ways of life. Legal, political, socioeconomic systems are based on Indigenous values and stewardship principles. To me, that's the systems change part of this work. It doesn't say management over resources, right? The way we think about it today. Indigenous values and stewardship principles are the foundation for how we take care of the animals around us and be in relationship. That everyone gets what they need and doesn't take more, right? So for me, this is my spectrum. We're challenging you at your tables to help us plot. This is going to take a little bit of work, so we do have time built back in at the end of the day after the breakout workshop. So at least for now, get yourself oriented and start thinking about maybe some of those nuggets that we should have plotted. Because when we leave here tomorrow, my hope is that this spectrum, it represents all of you. That you're visible, that your issues matter, that we can see them and we know how to help and support you. This is what this is about, bringing visibility, that allyship piece. I don't know how to be a good ally to you if I don't know where you're at, what you're striving for. I know where we're at today, but I don't know your vision. I don't know where we need to go on this spectrum. So for now, at least get yourself oriented, and by the end of the day, we're going to challenge our tables to help us plot out this spectrum. And when we're done, this will be given back to you as a gift. Uh-huh.